Okay, Madam Chair, our next speaker is going to be Katie Ptak.
And just for everybody in the room, Katie will introduce herself. Then we do have just a few public comments and closing remarks. So, and we're approaching our 4:30 window. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Katie Ptak. I'm the General Counsel of the Department of Child Safety. I'm here on behalf of David Lujan, who sends his regrets but is out of town, to present the department's response for this hearing. First, I want to make clear how seriously the department takes the issue of missing children. The department's primary purpose is to protect children, and those at the department who have dedicated our careers to keeping children safe grieve alongside families when a tragedy occurs. We'd like to thank Chairwoman Parker, all of the members of this committee, and the families who have shared their stories for the opportunity to work together to solve these big problems. And I would also like to particularly thank the young people who shared their experience in foster care. I think it's always really important to listen to the voices of those who have experienced foster care. As was mentioned before, DCS leadership met with many of the speakers in this room in November to discuss the implementation of the new law. Before I get into our policies, procedures, and the work we're doing around missing children missing from foster care, I just wanted to remind the members of the committee that DCS case information is confidential, so I can't address a lot of the concerns that were raised today. However, each member of the legislature is entitled to a confidential briefing on any case and can reach out to either me or our Chief Legislative Liaison, Chris Gustafson, to set up a confidential briefing if there's anything you heard today that you would like additional information on. HB 2651, passed last year, codified the steps the department must take when a child is reported missing from foster care. In addition to the processes outlined in law and policy, the department has created partnerships with agencies that specialize in the location and recovery of missing, abducted, and runaway children, specifically the U.S. Marshals Service, Phoenix Police, Tucson Police, and the Arizona Department of Juvenile Corrections. The Marshals assist state, local, and other federal agencies upon request while working under the Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act. ADJC has a unit of sworn officers whose responsibilities include locating delinquent minors, and there is overlap often between the populations we serve, allowing them to provide us assistance. We're grateful for the assistance of these agencies. The department's policy requires that we request a pickup order through the court for any child that goes missing, runs away, or is abducted. We've worked with the Arizona administration of the courts, the Attorney General's office, and ADJC to create standardized orders for the court to issue when a child goes missing. These orders are sent to law enforcement to be entered into their database, so if a missing child has law enforcement contact, the officer knows that they have run away from foster care and are able to assist in their safe return. The department, pursuant to HB 2651, is also updating its sex trafficking training to include information about the legal requirements around missing children, which staff will take both when hired and annually. As a department, we strive for continuous improvement and are always looking for ways to better serve families. Of course, we want to find these missing children, but we also want to make sure that children are being placed in homes where they don't want to run away. First and foremost, we want to keep children in their homes with their parents whenever safely possible. Sometimes this means access to high-quality, affordable behavioral health services, so families don't feel that the only option they have to get help for their children is to give them to DCS. This year, DCS safely reduced the number of children in care to the lowest level in 15 years. In September, the department had 9,900 children in out-of-home care, the lowest level since July of 2008. This reflects a 53% decrease from its peak in 2016, and we anticipate building on those efforts. When a child does have to come into foster care, we want to make sure they're placed in a family-like setting, not a group home. To that end, the department is updating its foster home licensing contract by bifurcating it into two separate contracts, one for community foster homes and one for kinship family homes. Under this contract, when a child is placed in a kinship home, the family will be assigned a kinship navigator who will help the family become licensed if they choose, but even if they don't, will walk alongside the family and help them navigate the complicated world of court, behavioral health, team decision-making, and everything else that comes with DCS involvement. This, along with a kinship waiver that the legislature authorized to the requirement of a licensed home to have a fingerprint clearance card, will allow more children to not only be placed with family, but to stay with family. Finally, when a child does have to be placed in a group home due to no other available placements, we want to make sure that that child has normalcy. What this means is that we want the child to have as normal a childhood as possible, even given the circumstances.
Hello.
And sometimes this means that kids are going to push boundaries and break curfew like any other child does. We need to make sure that our response is proportional and helps them grow into responsible adults who have been given the opportunity to make mistakes and learn from them. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee, and I'm available for any questions. And if there's any clarifying things you'd like, I can do that as well.
Committee, do we have questions for Ms. Ptak?
Madam Chair, forgive me, I'd like to start with just a comment. I understand it's the holidays and it was difficult, I'm sure, for even some members here to come and be here. I do want to say I am somewhat disappointed that Mr. Lujan is not here himself or couldn't have Zoomed in possibly or things like that. So that's a little disappointing because I definitely have quite a few questions that I had either before or that came up during. And I guess one of my questions is very specific to one of the wonderful parents who testified, and that was regarding Grace. Why, I'm assuming it is DCS policy that someone who potentially has been in a dangerous situation, a child who's in DCS care, would be checked out at a hospital or whatever. Why didn't that occur for Grace?
Madam Chair and Representative Jones, so I don't have specific, this is the first time I'm hearing about
Okay.
that case as well, so I don't have specific information. Again, if you want to do a confidential briefing, I'm happy to go, we can talk about the whole case and all the details.
Okay.
I will say it is in our policy that when a child returns from runaway status, that they get a medical exam. But as far as that particular case, I don't have information as to if or why that wasn't followed.
Okay, I apologize. So it is just a follow-up, Madam Chair. It is policy to do that. So that's why I was just that was kind of a, and would you mind if I follow up with another
Please,
question?
please.
So kind of on the same wavelength, but not, if there is a potential case of abuse within a group home. So I think I heard high heels or something. There were some different situations given today. What is the policy on abuse within those homes and informing whether it's the foster parent, bio parents of a potential case of that? What is your policy on that?
So Madam Chair and Representative Jones, the department, as far as an abuse or neglect investigation, so kind of two investigations would be involved here. So there's an abuse or neglect, like a child welfare investigation, and those we only investigate against a parent, guardian, or custodian. So child on child, that's not a department matter, that would be a law enforcement matter. That could be a licensing issue, depending on the facts, like if there was a failure to supervise, if they knew, the kids had problems and they kept them together. Certain facts may warrant a licensing investigation on the group home, but like in that case, again, I'm not sure off the top of my head what happened. As far as notification, I would have to get back to you on that because I don't know. If it were an abuse or neglect investigation, we are required to notify all parents. So we would serve them, it's called a notice of duty to inform. It's a form that says we're investigating child abuse or neglect against your child, and we give it to the parents so they're notified. But again, when it's child on child, it could be on law enforcement, but I will take some notes and we'll get back to you on that one, okay?
Question? Representative?
Madam Chair, and please give me your name again.
Sure, my name is Katie Ptak,
Ptak,
P-T-A-K.
Ptak. On November 27th, you guys had a stakeholders meeting with some constituents, and it was relayed that DCS would wait 1 to 2 hours before reporting any child missing. Why would DCS want to deviate from federal mandate?
Madam Chair and Representative Marshall, so the group homes have a 2-hour window to report to us. And the reason for that is because, again, so a kid is supposed to be home from school at 3. They're not home at 4. So maybe they went to a friend's house. Kids do kid stuff. So maybe they went to a friend's house. Maybe they're getting tutoring. We don't know. We give them 2 hours. So at the 2-hour mark, the group home is supposed to tell us that they're missing. then we have 24 hours to complete the whole checklist of things that must happen. So we have, the way we should get the report is a call to a hotline. So we maintain a 24/7 statewide centralized hotline. So the group home should call the hotline, say, hey, this kid didn't come home from school today. If it's after hours, we have what's called AHIT. So there are after hours teams. So AHIT would then be the one, doing the work on that case initially. If it's during the day, then the case manager should be the one getting the information. But we do have 24/7 people who are working on these issues. So I'm not sure I would say that we're not, we said we weren't complying with federal law. I think we may have been conflating a couple issues there.
Madam Chair? Well, you brought up another point, too. What happens on weekends? Okay, I know what happens. You'll call, somebody's missing. There's no answer, but there's a message left. But nobody responds until the following Monday. Is that correct?
Madam Chair and Representative Marshall, no, that should not be correct. So the group homes are supposed to call the hotline when a kid goes missing, because for exactly what you're saying. The hotline is a 24/7. It operates 24/7, and as I said, we have our after hours team that does nights and weekends. So if a child were to go missing at midnight or on a Saturday, it would be the after hours team that would handle it until the case manager got back on Monday.
Okay. Madam Chair, just want to clarify this, because it's been reported that when a child does go missing, that they will make a phone call, but they only get a voicemail and won't hear anything until Monday.
Madam Chair and Representative Marshall, thank you for letting me clarify that. So if they call straight to the worker may be off over the weekend. That's why in the contracts, they're required to call the hotline when a child goes missing, because the hotline is 24/7. So if somebody were to not call the hotline, but they call the case manager, our case managers don't work 24/7, right? So that's why we have the centralized hotline that's always available to answer the call. But if the reporter weren't to know, like if a foster parent, potentially maybe didn't know I'm supposed to call the hotline and just left a message for the case manager, I can understand that maybe they wouldn't get a call back until Monday. But that's why we have the separate 24-hour hotline.
Excellent. Please, Representative Contreras.
Thank you, Chairman, and Ms. Ptak. Question, so the young lady that spoke to us from the group home said that there's only one person on to keep an eye on 8 to 10 children. She also mentioned that it would be just nice to feel loved in those group homes and all, and I can totally understand that. We all want to feel that love and for ourselves and our compassion for different people, the young people. My question to you is, are there requirements for staffing or training in group homes, like the number of staff that should be there, and what kind of training should they be receiving? As Representative Marshall mentioned, do they know to call the hotline versus calling, the caseworker? They probably had a long relationship with the caseworker, so they're probably used to calling the caseworker, but if it's a weekend, then something like that won't be addressed until Monday or Tuesday.
So, Madam Chair and Representative Contreras, yes, so all of that is in licensing rule. It's in our group home rules, which I'm happy to send to you, although they're like 99 pages, so I don't know if you want to read all of them. That is all in our group home rules. It's in our contracts. We used to have what were called like family group homes, and so it would be what she described, where it was a mother and a father and maybe their children living in a home, and they had several kids in the home, outside of like the foster licensing number of beds. I don't believe we still have, do we have any? We do have some. So we still have a couple of the family group homes that describe that fit what she described. But the model is kind of not that.
Follow up,
Please.
as far as, thank you, Chairman. Ms. Ptak, as far as actual staffing levels, are there staffing levels that are required? If you could just mention what those should be, and how often are these facilities monitored?
Madam Chair and Representative Contreras, I don't know them off the top of my head. I'm happy to get you those numbers. They are monitored quite frequently. So every child in the group home has a case manager, so a child welfare case manager. And that case manager is required to visit the child in their placement every 30 days. So if you have 10 kids in that group home, you have 10 case managers that are each required to be in that home once a month. So DCS is in these homes very frequently.
Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
I would like to piggyback on Representative Contreras. Ms. Ptak, when I think it was just mentioned, if there is one adult with 10 children, I can see some serious potential issues with that for accountability. Is there, and I know you mentioned you could send her the actual specifics on that, but are they required to have more than one adult? Because unfortunately, when you have vulnerable children, this day and age in certain places, that could run into some issues where if there's one adult, there's really no accountability, where it would be better to have minimum two so that you have two, two sets of eyes. So I don't know, am I making sense with what I'm saying?
Madam Chair and Representative Jones, yeah, you are. And I think some of the numbers it's similar to like a child care facility and has to do with the ages of the children. And I also think it has to do with time of day. So like overnight, there's one person in the home, but during the day when the kids are awake, like a worker has to drive a kid to school or take them to soccer or whatever. Obviously, you need more than one worker in the home. So if I'm recalling, it has more to do around time of day and the age of child as far as how many workers are required.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Ptak, a couple of questions for you. First of all, thank you so much for being here to represent DCS. If I may ask a question, how long have you been with DCS?
Madam Chair, so I was with the department for about 7 years previously, and then I left for a little bit, and I've been back since May.
Okay, great. And I appreciate all the things you've mentioned. If I may give you a follow-up, I was notified by the foster care community advocate that Damien had gone missing, and that this was on a Wednesday, just here in November, October maybe. It was the end of October, beginning of November. I was notified by the community that Damien had gone missing and been found dead. Parents hadn't been notified. I was at that same night that Grace had been enticed away with another young child by a foster care person. A young teen, and then this was my Wednesday here at the Capitol at 10 p.m. By the time I could get a hold of Director Luan for an immediate meeting was a Saturday morning, and I had found out on Friday night 2 more had been enticed away, which I mentioned on Saturday in a group call. You might not have been aware of it, with Mr. Lujan, and he was completely unaware of any of these missing. Just thought I'd throw that out there. That might have been something you weren't aware of. So a couple of things. Who is overseeing, and let me just mention to everyone that when I dropped the bill in January, 2 kids have gone missing from a DCS home, were not reported, found dead in a retention basin in my legislative district. And then I returned from the Middle East, and within a month, 5 more children in my legislative district alone now had gone missing. Now, there's 30 legislative districts in the state. This is just LD 10. So I want to emphasize that for the record. Who is overseeing foster care group homes?
Madam Chair, and can I make a clarifying point
Please.
before I go in? So I'm not going to get into the specific cases, but I am familiar with at least one of the ones you're talking about. Not all of these children are placed in DCS homes. So if they are in a home that is licensed by another agency and that home does not report to us that they are missing, we have no way of knowing unless the case manager is doing their visit, shows up, the kid is not there.
So they're not, pardon me for interrupting,
ahead.
but it's very much to that point. So are they not responsible to follow state law, which they should have had a copy of?
So, Madam Chair, we do not oversee behavioral health facilities.
Okay. And so
I will say that.
that would be a DHS. You're
That would be
talking
a
about
DHS.
Damien specifically, but not Grace and the others.
I'm not familiar with where the others are placed, but I know in that specific case, and that was what led to the delay. DCS was also not notified at the time he ran away.
Okay.
So, and I lost my train of thought. Okay, who is overseeing the DCS homes? So we have an office called the Office of Licensing and Regulation, OLR, and their job is to work with the foster home licensing agencies, so the people who work directly with our foster parents, and they also work with the group homes. So if there is an allegation of a licensing violation in one of these homes, then they would go out and investigate. Now, that being said, there could be a time where something happens in a group home that requires a law enforcement response, but is not necessarily a licensing violation because the group home acted appropriately or took protective measures. And so in that case, we would feel that the group home acted appropriately, but law enforcement would still be investigating. And that's kind of a little piece that I keep hearing come up, is that I think what we're grappling with is what's the appropriate role of DCS and what's the appropriate role of law enforcement. And so some of the things I'm hearing are really, at least under current law as it's written, are really a law enforcement responsibility. And even in 2651 is not necessarily a department responsibility. So I think, if we want the department taking on more of these, go knock on doors and look for children and all those kind of things, those are things that we can do, but they're not things that we currently are authorized to do. Am I talking in circles?
Yeah.
No? Okay.
Keep talking.
Okay.
Okay, a couple of the questions. If you call a caseworker, is there info on a recording giving hotline numbers to a caseworker?
So, Madam Chair, what they are all supposed to have on their voicemail is their supervisor's name and contact number and information. Like what it says is, if this is a child abuse or neglect situation, you need to call the hotline, and here's the hotline number. It's also in the signatures for their emails.
Okay. Would you know or understand why there isn't a dedicated unit to this that is like a rapid response team?
Yes, Madam Chair. So we have a unit that's called OCWI, the Office of Child Welfare Investigations. So no one in the department is a sworn officer. We are not like ADJC where we have law enforcement officers who work for us. We have social workers who work for us. We do have the OCWI. What they do primarily is anytime an allegation comes in that meets criminal conduct, so the allegations, if true, would be felony child abuse or anything related to sex abuse, they are assigned to the case. Because we want to make sure that as we're doing our investigation, we aren't interfering with any sort of like law enforcement investigation. So these are people who are like kind of hirely trained. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. So they're like extra trained in these like criminal conduct cases. So they within their unit are the ones who assist with these missing children cases, and they're the ones who came up with the connections with law enforcement. So they're kind of our liaisons with law enforcement. So they work with the marshals, they work with, Phoenix PD and all those. The one other thing that I'll say about that is that there are certain things in policy that if a child who has run away has like these flags, it's automatically assigned to OCWI to look for it. So like if the child is pregnant, if they're on certain medications, if they have a trafficking history, the case should go to OCWI to immediately assist with the locate efforts.
Okay, and another question. You mentioned OCWI or OWCI, all these acronyms, I just love them here. You've seen that there's been testimony today about some breakdown with the follow-up on felony abuse and whose responsibility. How could you answer the disconnect of the ones that have happened here that have been mentioned?
So, Madam Chair, again, I just want to clarify that the department statutorily can only investigate abuse and neglect by a parent, guardian, or custodian. So, for example,
Let me interrupt you on that.
Sure.
When you say a parent, guardian, or custodian, that can mean any parent, guardian, or custodian within DCS's purview, correct?
Madam Chair, anyone in the state who is a parent, who is a legal guardian, or who has legal custody of a child, which is defined in case law as like a family court order type thing.
Now, wouldn't that also be the supervisors in the group home, the home parents?
Madam Chair, so you raise an interesting point. So a foster parent is considered, okay, so let me back up. Our hotline statute, which is 8455, delineates when we can take a report of abuse or neglect. So what 8455 says, that we can take a report if the perpetrator, the alleged perpetrator, is a parent, guardian, custodian, or an adult member of the child's household. Now, if it's a family group home like we talked about, or a foster home, that person is an adult member of the child's household, right? A group home staff who works there 8 to 5 under the law is not considered an adult member of the child's household. But I have some news on that. We are running a bill this year sponsored by, am I not supposed to say this? Okay. We are looking to sponsor a bill so that we can take reports on group home workers
Okay.
because we realize that's a gap.
Okay. You said that the hotline handles it, but we were told that they leave a message.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You said that, quote, the hotline handles this, but that a message is left.
So, Madam
Do you-
Chair, sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Apologize. Let me clarify myself better. I don't think I'm being very articulate. If a message is ever left, there's a gap between a message on a phone and when that is picked up by someone. Correct?
So, Madam Chair, I think what I said was that if it is after hours, that they are contacting the AHIT team, who is their 24/7, the after-hour investigation team, so, and they're there 24/7. So, if it's Saturday night at midnight, they're not going to call the worker and leave a voicemail. We know that doesn't work. We're going to send it to the after-hours team to begin the process.
Okay. And let me add, changing subjects, and please, if there's anything else from the committee, let me ask you a question. In your experience, how long does it take for a motion for pickup to be signed and get to the court?
Madam Chair, so we have, I believe we have 24 hours to work with the AGs. So here is part of the issue there. And we had this issue, if anybody remembers, probably not. We now get pickup orders to remove children from their homes. We didn't used to do that. So, and part of the problem was
Yeah, and don't include the initial removal of a child from
Right.
a home situation. Let's just focus on the order to pick up for the missing.
right.
I
So
think
so
you'll
the
never
issue
be
with
found.
those is that the juvenile court, where we would file it in the dependency case. The juvenile court is open 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So sometimes the pickup orders, even if we file them immediately, can take some time to get signed by the judge, because if it is a Saturday, the courts aren't open. They don't have like an on-call person that you can ask.
Okay, and let me just add something, if I may, to the record, because I have spoken with the Attorney General's office at length and done a lot of homework of my own. And for the record and for everybody on the committee, here's a step-by-step that was given to me by various experts that basically, let's assume in a perfect world everything's being done. A group home reports a missing child to police and to DCS. Sometimes the group home does not report to the police. Again, there can be that disconnect. But let's say the DCS places, we're talking about the perfect scenario, DCS places a child in a national database. Then a DCS case manager fills out paperwork, a request for legal motion to pick up the child. Step 4, the case manager sends a motion request paperwork to an email at the AG's office. Step 5, the motion is assigned to a secretary in the AG's office. Step 6, the secretary generates the motion and checks to see if all the right information is in for DCS paperwork, if it's all correct, gotten to the correct facility, the correct departments. Step 7, assuming that all the information is perfect, sent from DCS, the secretary now has to generate the motion and sends it to the lawyer in the AG office. Now, steps 1 through 7 may take 2 to 3 days before it ever lands on a lawyer's desk to sign. And keep in mind, workloads for them are high as well. Now, step 8 is that the attorney signs it and sends it back to a secretary. And then note, the attorney may not even be able to sign it for 2 to 3 more days because hundreds of equally demanding tasks are there as well to attend to, and they're in court every day, half a days. And they may be even more days they're in trial. Now, step 9, then, the secretary fills it out in court. All of this can take many days. Mm-hmm. By the time it gets to a judge to sign it, a good judge will sign it fast in a few days, but then step 11, court email the signed court order back to DCS, back to the AG, and sometimes to the police department. Finally, step 12, DCI now gets that court order to law enforcement to pick up the kid. In simple vernacular, this is what we call bureaucracy. Okay, but why couldn't we eliminate the whole process?
So,
Because, let me add, my child goes missing, I don't have to do any of that. Let's just eliminate all of that.
So, Madam Chair, I think you bring up a really good point. And the reason I brought up the removal system is because the legislature created, and we work with the courts, a way for us, for our caseworkers, to go straight to a judge, a 24-hour judge, and get a court order for removal. So I think you bring up a really good point of why can't we do that for the pickup orders too? I mean, I would want to think through it, but I don't see any reason that we couldn't, with the resources, do that exact same thing and take the whole rest of it out of it. I'm going to write that down.
Yeah, good. Please do. That is a common complaint, and again, it's going to a secretary with a mass email and getting through to a lot of emails and going back, and there's a huge gap of time and delays. This could be days, and 24 hours is the law for reporting. I don't see any reason why, if the law states they go missing, they're reported, put on the database following our checklist, that couldn't be all eliminated. And you don't necessarily need a police order for pickup.
Madam Chair, that's right. That's only if the child has law enforcement contact, then the law enforcement officer knows to take the child back.
Okay. Changing questions, as the committee would like to jump in, feel free, I have a whole bunch. But is it your understanding that DCS is notifying caregivers? Always, consistently, appropriately?
Madam Chair, it is our policy that we notify caregivers.
Okay, great. Would you say that you are creating media packages?
Madam Chair, so I'm glad you asked that question because I heard this come up. So in 2651, as I understand it, law enforcement creates the media package. And the reason behind that is because of the confidentiality laws. So if you look at 8807, there are very few circumstances under which, and this is based on federal law, that DCS, as the child welfare agency, can release information. So if we say this kid is missing, everybody then knows they're a foster kid, and we can't say that. But law enforcement can.
Let me stop you right there. You may not have been in committee with us at the legislature. However, federal law, reference 42 U.S.C. 5780.1 states that the safety of the child, the confidentiality of the child, is safety of the child trumps the confidentiality. And we did bring that up. So that is now a moot point. So, again, this is federal statute that the safety of the child.
Yes, Madam Chair. And 8807, though, says that there have to be exigent circumstances, and that's defined as if we don't act immediately, then the child could die. And obviously, there are times where we have information if the child's abducted, because we'll put out an Amber Alert. Well, we don't put it out an Amber Alert. We'll ask law enforcement to put out an Amber Alert. But if most of the kids, and I know we're hearing stories where this was not the case, most of the children who run from group homes go to stay with friends or they go back to their birth families.
Take me home.
And so if we think a child is with a friend or with a birth family, then I'm not sure we have that exigent circumstances exist that they're going to be killed, right? I mean, there have to be some sort of additional safety risk is the way that we have interpreted that law.
And in your interpretation and your definition, these foster care children with behavioral health situations in foster care with a history of that, and they go missing, that's not exigent.
Madam Chair, that could be, yes. But I'm saying the vast majority of the children who are running are going back to their parents and maybe don't have significant behavioral health needs.
I'll take a breath and let
Well-
Representative Jones ask
Well,
a question.
I'm chomping at the bit to get in
Thank
here.
you.
So, Madam Chair, because she mentioned Amber Alerts, that was one of the questions I had on my list. I was under the assumption of what I had heard that that Amber Alerts were not issued for children missing out of foster care. Can you please clarify that for me?
Yes, Madam Chair, so we can only we can only ask law enforcement to issue an Amber Alert when felony kidnapping has occurred. And so when a child, this is what the law states. So when a child is kidnapped out of foster care from a visit or from whatever, that is when, under the statute, we are allowed to ask law enforcement for an Amber Alert. So if a child runs away, there's no felony that's been committed, and we don't have legal authority to ask for an Amber Alert.
Any other emergency questions from anybody? Go ahead.
Well,
Anything?
it's not emergency, but then I'll let you go again because I know you have a lot of questions. I really just have one more, and it has to do with these cases. What amount of time goes by? When do you close these? I guess in DCS missing children cases, what is the time period for that?
Madam Chair, we would close the case when the child turns 18 because we no longer have legal authority over the child.
And as chair, we are approaching the 5 o'clock window, which time flies, and I wish that we could just keep going. And as the chair, I have to make a stopping point.